Hey guys, in today's video I'm going to show you my process for editing portraits in Lightroom, and there really is no one size fits all approach to editing portraits, of course, but I thought it would be fun if we edited a natural light portrait. I'll sort of give you a glimpse into my ethos when it comes to editing photos in Lightroom and just show you my entire process. This video will be all about Lightroom. I might cover retouching in Photoshop in a later video if you guys happen to be interested. And let's get started. Let's dive into Lightroom and work on the natural light photo. Alright, so we've got the shot up in Lightroom, and the preset that we'll be kind of recreating in this video is called Santos. And it's one of my own, and it gives us a really clean, neutral look. And if I apply it and then just raise the exposure a little bit, as you can see, it's literally almost finished and looks great when I apply it. So let's recreate it a bit now and reset this image. One thing I must stress is that I shot this photo in the most soft, pleasing light that I could find on the location on the day. And this has really helped immensely with this shot and the look that I'm going for. And that's because my goal for this shot, and I do think it is important to envision a goal to work towards before you start editing a photo, is I wanted a really soft, dreamy environmental portrait. That's why I shot wide open at f1.4 to get that nice blurry background, and why I chose to shoot in such soft light. Editing kind of starts on the day of the shoot for me in these little decisions like outfits, like location, lighting, and posing, and even lens choice. I'm trying to give myself all the ingredients that I need to help me later on in editing to achieve the final look that I'm going for. And these little decisions are just going to make life so much easier later on when it comes to editing. So let's get started. Let's raise the exposure just a little bit because our image is a bit dark. And the first thing I always do is set my camera color profile. By default, yours might be set to Adobe Color, which can work fine for most images, but personally, I'm usually setting this to either Camera Standard or Camera Faithful. Now, as to which I choose really depends on the image, because Camera Standard gives a more saturated, contrasty base for your image to work with, whereas Faithful, if I set it to Faithful, is much softer with reduced contrast and is quite a bit more desaturated. And for this image, I'm gonna go with Faithful because I just think it suits the look that I'm aiming for more. It depends on your camera brand, but always experiment with your camera manufacturer's color profiles before just settling on Adobe Color. And now we've set that, the first thing I'm noticing is that we have a bit of a green color cast in this image. I shot this in a greenhouse, so light is bouncing off all the green plants and hitting our model and affecting her skin tone. So to counter this a bit, I'm gonna move the tint slider to about plus 19 or so, and that really helps. And the other thing I'm gonna do is come down to calibration, and I'm gonna push the green hue tab over to the right, just a little bit towards magenta, not much about there. And again, this just helps reduce that color cast, and now things just look a lot more natural. And now my ethos with white balance is that I generally just try to get it to what the scene looked like in person on the day, and then I warm it up a little bit to taste. And on this shot, I manually set my white balance to daylight, so it's pretty true to life here already, but I'm just gonna raise it just very slightly. There, I really like how that looks. So for the rest of our exposure settings, my aim at this stage is to reduce contrast a little bit and then use the tone curve later on to selectively add contrast back into the shot. For a low contrast look, I always like to set my black and white points first. So if we lower our white slider to say minus 15 or so, this pulls down our image's absolute white point very slightly and gives us more muted whites. And if we do the same with the blacks, raising them to plus 15, this raises our black point and gives us more of a faded look to the darkest areas of the image. I'll then just lower the highlights a little bit and raise the shadows just to bring back some detail. Lowering the highlights like this evens out the skin tones in our model's face and brings back some skin detail too. And raising the shadows a little bit is just bringing back some fine detail in our model's hair, as you can see. So already we have a nice low contrast, soft looking image as a base point. So next up, for this particular image and the vision that I have for it, I'm actually going to reduce the clarity a little bit, just to -5 or so. And this just reduces contrast in the midtones and gives the effect of softening details a little bit. It gives the image that softer, gentle look, and it also evens out skin tones just a little bit and reduces skin detail, so it can be quite flattering on portraits. Often I'll go as low as -10 on certain shots, but to me, like I say, I think -5 is about fine on this particular shot. This is a super sharp prime lens, so I'm just toning things down a little bit here. And to counter this, just very lightly, I'm going to bump the haze up to about +5, which just pulls back a little bit of contrast and depth into our image. Next up, I'm going to raise our vibrance quite a bit to around 25 to 30 and then reduce the overall saturation by about -5. I prefer to increase vibrance over saturation, particularly on portraits, because vibrance is a smarter tool and it enhances less saturated tones in an image without overdoing the already vibrant tones. And this is especially handy for keeping skin tones looking natural, whereas saturation, that just increases all the colors in an image uniformly. As you can see, if we max out both. So here's saturation at max, and here is vibrance maxed out. So vibrance is a much gentler tool. Vibrance is just much more gentle on our skin tones, as you can see, compared to saturation. And if I lower the saturation back to -5, these adjustments give us our slightly desaturated image without compromising on nice, punchy, healthy skin tones, and we can desaturate specific colors further later on. Okay, things are looking good, so onto our tone curve. And our goal with the tone curve is to selectively add back in some contrast. And we'll start in the point curve, and we will add 3 dots. 1 in the center here for the midtones, 1 up here for the highlights, and 1 down here for the shadows. And the first thing that I'm going to do is raise the black point of the image by dragging this point up slightly. This affects our true black point, meaning blacks are softer and have a very slightly subtle, faded look to them, which I really like on this image. And I'll do something similar to our white point on the opposite end of the tone curve, just pulling it down a little bit. And reducing this softens the brightest highlights of the image and gives our whites a more matte, creamy look. So now I'm going to push our highlight point up just very slightly, and then come down and lower our shadow point just a little bit. I'm going to add a point in between our 2 shadow points, drag this down further, and then that means that this point is just affecting the very darkest parts of our image, mainly the hair. So now doing this, we just got a very subtle S-curve, making our image a bit more punchy. If I toggle this on and off, you can see now skin tones just pop a little bit more, and that's what bumping these highlights really helped with. But at the same time, rolling off the shadows and the highlights has meant our image still has a nice soft look to it. Now we can go on over to the parametric curve, and I will show you a technique that I use all the time on all of my images to also help with that kind of matte, soft pastel look to whites. What I'll do is generally raise this slider, and this slider determines the range that this highlight slider affects. And I'll up this to around about 85, so that our highlight slider is only affecting the very brightest whites in the image that we can see in this section here of the histogram. You can use this little tool here to check where parts of your image fall on the histogram. So that can really help guide you when setting these sliders. I find that 85 generally works. And how much is up to taste, but you can really pull this down for more dreamy soft portraits, as it softens only the brightest whites in the image, as you can see if I go extreme with it. But just bringing it down slightly to say -35 on this shot really evens out the skin tone on the face. I'm going to do the same at the opposite end to affect, again, the very dark parts of the shot, lowering the slider to 10 or so, and reducing this shadows slider just a little bit to maybe just -5. Just adds a little bit of punch to the darkest shadows in this shot. And that's it. With the tone curve section finished, you can see how much contrast we've selectively pushed back into our photo while still keeping the overall softer tones of the image. Guys, I hope you're enjoying this tutorial so far and have maybe learned something. And on the subject of learning and self-development, this video is sponsored by Skillshare. Skillshare is the go-to community for creatives online, offering thousands of classes taught by industry experts in everything from film and illustration to design, freelance work, productivity, and more. Whether you're looking to boost your career, sharpen your skills, or just dive into your hobbies and passions, well, Skillshare is here to help you level up. I've been juggling more creative projects than ever lately, and I really needed to up my organizational game. And Ali Abdal's class on maximizing your productivity and organization has been a game changer for me. Also, for all of you portrait photographers out there, I should mention that Skillshare has a ton of tutorials from industry pros that can really help you fine-tune your retouching skills or editing skills overall. If you're excited to unlock all of the creative possibilities Skillshare offers, well then the first 500 people to click the link in the description will score a free 1-month trial. So invest in yourself and dive in today. Now onto our HSL panel. And in the hue panel, I always start with orange, which is going to affect our skin tones. And we've already mentioned there's a bit of a green color cast, and although we've improved it, I'm going to push orange just slightly more over to magenta, just by -5 or so, just to correct that skin tone very slightly. I'm also going to push the reds towards pink, which is going to really enhance the color of the lips and add a bit of color contrast into the face. Right now in this image, the greens and yellows in the background are pretty overbearing, and there's lots of slightly different tones all competing with each other. So my goal in the HSL panel now is to subdue some of the colors in the background and then adjust them so that they complement each other rather than clash. Starting with yellow, it's just really affecting these cactuses in the bottom right, but I want to push them towards green just so that they are closer in color to the rest of the background. And I'm also going to push the green slider to the right to make our greens more of a cool teal. And if we use this tool, you can see that aqua and blue is going to really affect our model's dress. And again, I want to push these in the same direction because the original green color of the dress just blends in a little bit too much with the background, and pushing it over towards this nice complementary turquoise color really makes our model stand out against the background, but the dress color still fits nicely into our color palette. That's a big improvement to the colors already. Now onto saturation. I'm going to really decrease the saturation of the greens and the yellows. And that's really subdued those bright overpowering colors in the background. I don't like really bright greens in my images, so this is something that I do all the time. I'll also slightly desaturate the dress using this tool, which will reduce the blue and aqua channels. If we toggle this on and off, you can see now we have a much more cohesive color palette. We've gone from having a mix mash of colors and tones to just really having two main complementary colors in our image. And over in luminance, again, I'm going to drop the luminance of our yellow and green channels, and lowering these just really helps our subject stand out against a now darker background. I'll slightly raise the luminance of orange just to brighten our skin tones, and then lower the red channel to just darken the lips slightly and add some contrast into the face. I'm also going to raise aqua a little bit because that's just going to really make the model's dress pop even more. Yeah, that looks really good. So yeah, this is before and after with the HSL, and we have made a huge difference. Now on this image, I'm not going to do any split toning. I'm happy with how our colors are looking. Next, I'll come down to sharpening and just leave all the settings at default. But what I am going to do is I'm going to hold Option on my Mac, or I think it's Control on Windows, and just raise this masking slider until the sharpening is just affecting our subject, which will really help make her stand out a little bit. And it's going to leave our background smooth and unaffected from any sharpening. This just keeps all the sharpening onto our subject. Okay, that's mostly it. Finishing touches, For this shot, I would probably put on a little bit of a vignette because our model is composed centrally. I also like to add a little bit of grain to our image, just for a more organic filmic look, and I think it works really nicely on this shot. Last thing I'll do is mask the background like this and drop the exposure slightly, just to -14 or so. Then I'll come down and drop the texture and drop clarity just a little bit, and toggling that on and off. Darkening the background and softening the details really helps make our subject pop against that background. Also going to brighten the eyes up a little bit because we're drawn to a subject's eyes, and our subject has slightly dark eyes in this shot. So let's go to masking, select people, person 1, and choose both of these eye settings, and that will mask our eye. And then I'm just going to raise the exposure probably by like 0.25. Yeah, that looks a lot better. So that's it. I'm really happy with how this looks. And if I was going to fully edit and finish this shot in Lightroom, then I might use my skin enhance tool just for some kind of quick retouching. And this just reduces skin texture for a quick skin smoothing effect. And that is it. That is our final image. So that is it. That is my entire process in Lightroom when it comes to editing a portrait. Here's our final before and after. Hopefully this video was useful. If you think I've missed anything or you have any questions, then feel free to leave them in the comments below. And also, if you want to see what I do in Photoshop to my portraits after the Lightroom stuff, then let me know in the comments as well. I've recently released my own Lightroom presets for portraits and travel photography. So if you want a bit of a shortcut to achieving my kind of editing style, and you want to support the channel a little bit, then check those out in the description. But that's everything. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.